It's Blue Cup. We're back. This is part 3 of a 3-part episode on extra biblical corroboration of the events surrounding Jesus and the early church. If you didn't watch the first 2 episodes, I'm going to throw a thought bubble up here. It'll be somewhere, and you can click on that little thought bubble, and it'll take you back to the first one or the second one so that you can be caught up. So for the time being, I've thrown out 9 highly compelling secular sources that fall within the first 100 years of the life of Christ. But in addition to that, there are tons of extra-biblical Christian sources that some people just say, that doesn't count, they were Christians. Well, I think they do count in the same way that Julius Caesar writing about himself counts for giving us insight as to what went on in the story of Julius Caesar. It's not like all these extra-biblical Christian writings were just fabricated. They indicate a pattern of belief that people all over the Mediterranean world, where they weren't calling each other on the phone or connecting on the internet, all these people all had the same take on what happened. And all the things they wrote still had to pass muster under the review of a living memory audience. I'm not going to read excerpts from all of these extra-biblical early Christian sources, but I am going to run down some of the details so that you can look them up for yourself if you would like later on. Clement of Rome wrote letters to the Corinthian church, among other things, and essentially confirms Luke's account in Acts across the board of how the church developed. Ignatius of Antioch died around 100 AD. He wrote from about 70 AD until the end of his life, and in that writing he confirmed a lot of the political details of Jesus' execution, as well as the religious details of his teaching, as well as the practical details of his life and the wonders he performed. He also gave accounts of the early church that line up neatly with the book of Acts. We also get the same kind of accounts from Quadratus, Aristides, and Justin Martyr. There's a ton of rich detail there, and you can look all of that up on your own time if you would like. So here's the thing. If you go back through and think about all the things that we have externally confirmed from each of these sources that I mentioned and listed out, it's like most of the New Testament. It's really well covered outside the Bible. And it's far better coverage than most of the things we think we know about this same period in history that don't have to do with Jesus and Christianity. Look, I'm not naive. I get what's going on here. It doesn't cost anybody anything. It doesn't affect anything. It doesn't weigh in on any political or social arguments of the day to think one thing or another thing about the people of Athens or Sparta or what was going on in Carthage in 150 BC. I mean, it's all interesting, but it just doesn't have bearing on today. But this does. I think the harshest critics of the Bible really exaggerate the quality of their position and maybe even tiptoe close to intellectual dishonesty when they say things like, there's no proof Jesus ever existed, or, well, the things in the Bible are only written down in the Bible and there's no external corroboration. It just ain't true. I just gave you 9 of them. You can look them up for yourselves. And you can go through and nitpick and try to attack the quality of every one of these things. But I was pretty honest with you about those places where those critiques hold water and where they don't. It's just historians who wrote things down. They weren't even trying to prop up the church. These external historians, if anything, were trying to criticize the church. Well, some might say, if this is also true, then why isn't there more archaeological evidence? What would there be archaeological evidence of? Jesus didn't build any buildings. He didn't mint any coins. He didn't lead any armies. There are no wars. There are no spear tips. There are no mass graves. There's a guy who taught ideas and did miraculous good things in front of people. The evidence is found in reason and in eyewitness accounts and those people who sourced those eyewitness accounts to write their own secondhand accounts, like most stuff in history. For those who would say, well, Jesus might have been real, but everything about the church was just because kind of a legend grew up around him and then people followed that legendary version of Jesus. But we're talking about a few weeks between the time Jesus was alive and the time that the church really got going. Legends don't develop that fast. Can you think of any corollary in modern times where huge groups of people suddenly imagine someone who's still alive or was just alive a couple of weeks ago to have been imbued with magical powers? I mean, nobody thinks that. Legends take forever to evolve. They take tellings of retellings of retellings of retellings over years, decades, generations, centuries. This just doesn't follow that recipe at all. The fact of the matter is, the accounts in the Bible, the historical accounts we looked at today outside the Bible, and the Christian accounts from outside the Bible all hold themselves out to be historical. That's the genre they're writing in. Nothing about it indicates that it's a prank or a hoax, or that there was any power to be gained from having people accept the writings that they put down. All of that stuff that people think about the powerful church and the money and the armies, that is hundreds of years down the road. We're just not there yet at the point in history that we're looking at today. Look, what is irrefutable is that there is such a thing as Christianity and that there has been for 2,000 years. If Christianity has existed this long, it means we need to find a plausible explanation for where it came from. And since the origins of Christianity are not based in power or conquest, the most plausible explanation is the one that we actually have in front of us right now. It doesn't make sense to grasp at straws or try to pull things out of thin air to come up with something that makes more sense. This makes sense. Something miraculous happened. Sane, smart, capable people with brains like you and me, who are discerning like you and me, looked at it and said, I don't get it. It blows my mind, but I saw that with my eyes. All my buddies saw that thing too, and then we saw more stuff, and it adds up. And they gave their lives and they gave their stuff in dedication to that belief. That's the simplest, most logical explanation for what we see happening here. The simple reality is that all of these corroborating sources and the Bible line up neatly with what we see in history. All the locations that we see in the Bible line up neatly with archaeology and the geography from Roman times that we still have in front of us. All the places are in relation to all the other places as they should be and as they still are. The names line up, the dates line up. This looks like something that happened historically, and it looks like there aren't glaring historical errors in this account. Anymore, if you really boil it down, I think what people are really having an issue with is historical inquiry in general when they complain about the reliability of the Bible or these accounts. In the 21st century West, we're all pretty good at scientific inquiry, and we all understand those parameters. Without meaning any insult to you or to me, I just don't think it's quite as natural for us anymore to engage in non-scientific inquiry, to study the past. I think that we've kind of started to believe that everything that happened before right this moment is just totally a matter of opinion and interpretation. People lazily repeat things like history was written by the winners, when the fact is we have a whole lot of history that was written by the losers, like these people. They were not the winners at this point in history and wouldn't be for hundreds of years, long after their deaths. Historical research and inquiry is hard. It's a practice that we're not into. But if we take a few minutes like this to look at it together, we see that belief in the account regarding Jesus is not crazy. It's rooted in history, and there's a valid reason to think this. Now, last thought. I completely get that somebody could look at this same information, could read these same passages, and think to themselves, it sounds like people thought that's what was going on, but I don't believe it myself. Cool. Agree to disagree. This is the internet. I don't need to convince you. You don't need to think what I think. I don't need to think what you think. No hard feelings. I understand that like many people throughout history, not everyone today is going to buy it. Okay. But for me, it's very compelling, and it's not compelling without good reason. That Jesus existed, that huge multitudes saw Jesus do things that they were absolutely convinced were miraculous, that Jesus got crossways with the state, was tried, and was executed by Pontius Pilate, and that a widespread faith in him that transcended both Jews and Gentiles occurred immediately after his death are irrefutable historical facts as we define historical facts. Only people on the most radical fringe would try to argue that there was no Jesus and no early church. I know this was a very weird episode of the 10-Minute Bible Hour. We'll be back to the book of Acts next time around. It just seemed like a good idea to me to pause 4 chapters in with all of these fantastic accounts of amazing things that happened, and just stop and maybe kind of address the question, how do we know any of this is real? Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully you had some fun. Hopefully you stayed awake for the whole thing. Like I said, back to 10-Minute Bible Hour-iness next time around. I'm Matt Whitman. This has been like the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and we'll get going again in a week. Catch you soon.